Hello, this is the Watchman, and welcome back to the Bible. Now, we're going to be picking up where we left off last time, which is Nehemiah, chapter 11, verse number 13. Let us begin. And his brethren, heads of the fathers' houses, were 242. And Amashai, the son of Azariah, the son of Azai, the son of Meshillamoth, the son of Emer, and their brethren, mighty men of valor, were 128. And their overseer was Zabdiel, the son of one of the great men. Also of the Levites, Shemiah, the son of Hasab, the son of Azrikam, the son of Hashbiah, the son of Buni, Shabbathai, and Jozabad, of the heads of the Levites, had the oversight of the business outside of the house of God. Mattaniah, the son of Micah, the son of Zabdi, the son of Asaph, the leader who began the thanksgiving with prayer. Bakbukiah, the second among his brethren, and Abda, the son of Shammua, the son of Galal, the son of Jeduthun. All the Levites in the holy city were 284. Moreover, the gatekeepers, Akub, Talman, and their brethren, who kept the gates, were 172. And the rest of Israel, of the priests and Levites, were in all the cities of Judah, everyone in his inheritance. But the Nethinim dwelt in Opho, and Zihah, and Gishpa were also over the Nethinim. Also, the overseer of the Levites at Jerusalem was Uzi, the son of Bani, the son of Hashabiah, the son of Mattaniah, the son of Micah, of the sons of Asaph, the singers in charge of the service of the house of God. For it was a king's command concerning them, that a certain portion should be for the singers, a quota day by day. Pethahiah, the son of Meshabel, of the children of Zerah, the son of Judah, was the king's deputy in all matters concerning the people. As for the villages with their fields, some of the children of Judah dwelt in Kirjath Arba and its villages, Dibon and its villages, Jekabzeel and its villages, in Jeshua, Molada, Beth, Pelet, Azar, Shul, and Beersheba, and its villages, in Ziklag, Mechana, and its villages, in En-Raman, Zorah, Jarmuth, Zanoah, Adullam, and their villages, in Lachish and its fields, in Azekah and its villages. They dwelt from Beersheba to the valley of Hinnom. Also the children of Benjamin from Geba dwelt in Michmash, Ijah, and Bethel, and their villages. In Anathoth, Nab, Ananiah, and Hazer, Ramah, Gidom, and Hadid, Zeboim, Nebalat, in Lod, Ono, and the Valley of Craftsmen. Some of the Judean divisions of Levites were in Benjamin. Nehemiah, chapter 12. Now these are the priests and the Levites who came up with Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, Soriah, Jeremiah, Ezra, Amariah, Maluk, Hattush, Shechaniah, Rehum, Meremoth, Edo, Ginnethoi, Abijah, Mijamin, Maadiah, Bilgah, Shemiah, Joiarib, Jadiah, Salu, Amok, Hilkiah, and Jediah. These were the heads of the priests and their brethren in the days of Jeshua. Moreover, the Levites were Jeshua, Benui, Kadmiel, Sherebiah, Judah, and Mattaniah, who led the thanksgiving psalms, he and his brethren. Also, Maccabuiah and Uni, their brethren, stood across from them and in their duties. Jeshua begot Joachim, Joachim begot Eliashib, Eliashib begot Joiada, Joiada begot Jonathan, and Jonathan begot Jaddua. Now in the days of Joachim, the priests, the heads of the fathers' houses were Serariah, Merariah of Jeremiah, Hananiah of Ezra, Meshullam of Amariah, Jehonanan of Meliku, Jonathan of Shebaniah, Joseph of Harim, Adna of Meraloth, Meraiath, Hilkiah of Edo, Zechariah of Ginnethon, Meshullam of Abijah, Zikri, the son of Minjamin, of Moadiah, Piltai, of Bilgah, Shemua, of Shemiah, Jehonathan, of Joiarib, Mattanai, of Jedaiah, Uzi, of Sauliah, Saulai, Kaulai, of Amok, Eber, of Hilkiah, Hashelbiah, and of Jedaiah, Nathaniel. During the reign of Darius the Persian, a record was also kept of the Levites and priests, who have been heads of their fathers' houses, in the days of Eliashib, Joiada, Johanan, and Jaddua, the sons of Levi, the heads of the fathers' houses, until the days of Johanan, the son of Eliashib, were written in the book of the Chronicles. And the heads of the Levites were Hashabiah, Sherebiah, and Jeshua, the son of Kadmiel, with their brothers across from them, to praise and give thanks, group alternating with group, according to the command of David, the man of God. Mattaniah, Babukiah, Obadiah, Meshullam, Talmon, Akub, and Akub were gatekeepers, keeping watch of the storerooms of the gate. These lived in the days of Joachim, the son of Joshua, the son of Jozadak, and in the days of Nehemiah, the governor of Ezra, the priest, the scribe. Now at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites in all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to celebrate the dedication with gladness, both with thanksgiving and singing, with cymbals and stringed instruments and harps. And the sons of the singers gathered together from the countryside around Jerusalem, from the villages of the Netophathites, from the house of Giggle, and from the fields of Geba and Asmaveth, for the singers had built themselves villages all around Jerusalem. Then the priests and Levites purified themselves, and purified the people, the gates, and the wall. So I brought the leaders of Judah up on the wall, and appointed 2 large thanksgiving choirs. One went to the right hand of the wall, towards the refuse gates. After them went Hashashiah, and half the leaders of Judah, and Azariah, Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, Jeremiah, and some of the priests' sons with trumpets of Zechariah, the son of Jonathan, the son of Sheremoth, the son of Mattaniah, the son of Micaiah, the son of Zakur, the son of Asaph, and his brethren, Shemiah, Azarel, Meolida, Galili, Mai, Nathaniel, Judah, Hanani, and Hanani with the musical instruments of David. The man of God, Ezra the scribe, went before them. By the fountain gate in front of them, they went up to the stairs of the city of David, on the stairway of the wall beyond the house of David, as far as the water gate eastward. The other thanksgiving choir went the opposite way, and I was behind them with half the people on the wall, going past the tower of the ovens as far as the broad wall, and above the gate of Ephraim, and above the old gate, above the fish gate, the tower of Hananel, the tower of the 100, as far as the sheep gate. They stopped by the gate of the prison. So the 2 thanksgiving choirs stood in half the house of God, likewise I and half the rulers with me, and the priests, Eliakim, Maaseiah, Benjamin, Micaiah, Elowenai, Zechariah, and Hananiah with trumpets. Also Maaseiah, Shemiah, Eliezer, Uzi, Jehohanan, Malchijah, Elam, and Ezra. The singers sang loudly with Jezrahiah, the director. Also that day they offered great sacrifices and rejoiced for God, and made him rejoice with great joy. The women and children also rejoiced, so that the joy of Jerusalem was heard afar off. And at the same time some were appointed over the rooms of the storehouses for the offerings, the firstfruits, and the tithes, to gather into them from the fields of the cities, portions specified by the law, for the priests and Levites. For Judah rejoiced over the priests and Levites who ministered. Both singers and gatekeepers kept the charge of their God and the charge of the purification, according to the command of David, for Solomon, and Solomon his son. For in the days of David and Asaph of old, there were chiefs of singers, and songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. In the days of Zerubbabel and in the days of Nehemiah, all Israel gave portions for the singers and the gatekeepers, a portion for each day. They also consecrated holy things for the Levites, and the Levites consecrated them for the children of Aaron. Nehemiah chapter 13. On that day, they read from the book of Moses in the hearing of the people, and in it was found written that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever come into the assembly of God, because they have not met with the children of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them to curse them. However, our God turned the curse into a blessing. So it was, when they had heard the law, that they separated all the mixed multitude from Israel. Now before this, Eliashib the priest, having authority over the storerooms of the house of God, of our God, was allied with Tobiah, and he had prepared for him a large room where previously they had stored grain offerings, the frankincense, the articles, and the tithes of grain, the new wine and oil which were commanded to be given to the Levites, and singers, and gatekeepers, and the offerings for the priests. But during all this, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I had returned to the king. Then after certain days I obtained leave from the king. And I came to Jerusalem and discovered the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah, in preparing a room for him in the courts of the house of God. And it grieved me bitterly. Therefore I threw all the household goods of Tobiah out of the room. Then I commanded them to cleanse the rooms. And I brought back into them the articles of the house of God, with the grain offering and the frankincense. I also realized that the portions of the Levites had not been given to them, for each of the Levites and the singers who did work had gone back to his field. So I contended with the rulers and said, "Why is the house of God forsaken?" And I gathered them together and set them in their place. Then all Judah brought the tithe of the grain offering, and the new wine and the oil in the storehouse. And I appointed as treasurers over the storehouse Shelemiah the priest, and Zadok the scribe, and of the Levites Pedadiah. And next to them was Hanan the son of Zakur, the son of Mattaniah, for they were considered faithful, and their task was to distribute to their brethren. Remember me, O my God, concerning this, and do not wipe out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God, and for its services. In those days I saw people in Judah treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves and loading donkeys with wine, grapes, figs, and all kinds of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I warned them about the day on which they were selling provisions. Men of Tyre dwelt there also, who brought in fish and all kinds of goods, and sold them on the Sabbath to the children of Judah in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said to them, What evil thing is this that you do, by which you profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers do thus, and did not our God bring all this disaster on us and on this city? Yea, you bring added wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath. So it was, at the gates of Jerusalem, as it began to be dark before the gates to be shut, and charged that they must not be opened until after the Sabbath. Then I posted some of my servants at the gates, that no burdens would be brought unto thee in on the Sabbath day. Now the merchants and the settlers of all kinds of wares lodged outside Jerusalem once or twice. Then I warned them, and said to them, Why do you spend the night around the wall? If you do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time on, they came no more on the Sabbath. Then I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves, and that they should go and guard the gates, to sanctify the Sabbath day. Remember me, O my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to the greatness of your mercy. In those days I also saw Jews who had married women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab, and half their children spoke the language of Ashdod, and could not speak the language of Judah, but spoke according to the language of one or the other people. So I contended with them, and cursed them, struck some of them, and pulled out their hair, and made them swear by God, saying, Ye shall not give your daughters as wives to their sons, nor take their daughters for your sons or yourselves. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin by these things? Yet among many nations there was no king like him. God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, pagan women caused him to sin, even him to sin. Should we then hear of your doing all this great evil, transgressing against our God by marrying pagan women? One of the sons of Jehoiada, the son of Eliashib, the high priest, was a son-in-law of Sanballat, the Horonite. Therefore I drove him from me. Remember them, O my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. Thus I cleansed them of everything pagan. I also assigned duties to the priests and the Levites, each to his service, and bringing the wood offering and the firstfruits at appointed times. Remember me, O my God, for good. Esther, Chapter 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This was the Ahasuerus who reigned over the 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was Shushan, the citadel, at the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast for all his officials and servants. The powers of Persia and Media, the nobles, and the princes of the provinces being before him. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty, for many days, 180 days in all. And when these days were completed, the king made a feast lasting 7 days for all the people who were present in Shushan, the citadel, from great to small. In the court of the garden of the king's palace, there were white and blue linen curtains fastened with cords of fine linen and purple. On silver rods and marble pillars, and the coaches were of gold and silver, on a mosaic pavement of alabaster, turquoise, and white and black marble. Then they served drinks in golden vessels, each vessel being different from another, with royal wine in abundance, according to the generosity of the king. In accordance with the law, the drinking was not compulsory, for so the king had ordered all the officers of his household that they should do according to each man's pleasure. Queen Vashti also made a feast for the women in the royal palace, which belonged to the king Ahasuerus, on the 7th day. When the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, 7 eunuchs, who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown, in order to show her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful to behold. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, brought by his eunuchs. Therefore the king was furious, and his anger burned within him. Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner towards all who knew law and justice, those closest to him being Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Mariz, Marsena, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king's presence, and who ranked highest in the kingdom. What shall we do to Queen Vashti according to the law, because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus, brought her by the eunuchs? Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also the princes and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes. When a report, King Ahasuerus commanded King Vashti to be brought before him, but she did not come. This very day the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they've heard of the behavior of the queen. Thus there will be excessive contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree grow out from him. Let it be recorded in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more to the king, come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. When the king's decree, which he will make, is proclaimed throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives will honor their husbands, both great and small. And the reply pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. Then he sent letters to all the king's provinces, each providing its own script to every people in their own language, that each man should master his own house and speak in the language of his own people. Esther, chapter 2. After these things, when the wrath of the king Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what he had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather all the beautiful young virgins to Shushan, the citadel, into the women's quarters, under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, custodian of the women, and let beauty preparations be given them. And let young women who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." So this thing pleased the king, and he did so. In Shushan, the citadel, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who had been captured with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful, and her father and mother died. Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So it was, when the king's command and decree were heard, and when many young women were gathered in at Shushan, the citadel, under the custody of Haggai, that Esther was also taken to the king's palace, into the care of Haggai, the custodian of the women. Now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor. So he readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace. And he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of the women. Esther has not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. At every day Mordecai paced in front of the court of the women's quarters to learn Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. Each woman's turn came to go to King Ahasuerus after she had completed 12 months preparation according to the regulations for the women. For thus there were the days of their preparation, apportioned 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfume and preparations for beautifying women. Thus prepared each young woman went to the king, and she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters to the king's palace. In the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch, who kept the concubines. She would not go into the king again, unless the king delighted in her and called for her by name. Now when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, to go into the king, she requested nothing but what Haggai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the women, advised. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther had taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight, more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all his officials and servants, and he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces and gave gifts according to the generosity of the king. When virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat within the king's gate. Now Esther had not revealed her family and her people, just as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai, as when she was brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed that both were hanged on the gallows, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Esther, chapter 3. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, and Agag, and the Agathites, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. And the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman. For so the king had commanded concerning him, but Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. When the king's servants who were within the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" Now it happened, when they spoke to him daily, and he would not listen to them, they told it to Haman, to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. For Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. Then Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage. Haman was filled with wrath, but he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. In the first month, which is in the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is, the lot, before Haman, to determine the day and the month, until it fell in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. When Haman said to the king Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all the other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work, to bring it into the king's treasuries." So the king took a signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "The money and the people are given to you, to do with them as seems good to you." And the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and the decree was written according to all that Haman commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to the officials of all the people. of all people, to every province according to its language, according to its script, and to every people in their language. In the name of the king, of King Ahasuerus, it was written and sealed with the king's signet ring. And the letters were sent by the couriers into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate the Jews, both young and old, little children and women. In one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the document was to be issued as a law for every province, being published for all the people, that they should be ready for that day. And the couriers went out, hastened by the king's commands, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan, the citadel. So the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. Esther, chapter 4. When Mordecai learned all that had happened, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city. He cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went as far as the front of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. In every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was a great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. And as many lay in sackcloth and ashes, so Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her. And the queen was deeply distressed. Then she sent garments to clothe Mordecai and take his sackcloth away from him, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend her, and she gave him a command concerning Mordecai, to learn what and why this was. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries to destroy the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, which was given by Shushan, that he might show to Esther and explain it to her, and that he might command her to go into the king and to make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. So Hathach returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court of the king who has not been called, he has but one law, to put all to death, except the one whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go into the king these 30 days. So they told Mordecai Esther's words, and Mordecai told them to answer Esther. Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, Go, gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan, and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way, and did according to all that Esther commanded him. Esther, chapter 5. Now it happened on the third day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal crown, in the royal house facing the entrance of the house. So it was, when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, that she found favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter. And the king said to her, "What do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you, up to half the kingdom." So Esther answered, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today, to the banquet I have prepared for him." Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, that he may do as Esther has said." So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther has prepared. At the banquet of wine, the king said to Esther, "What is your petition? It shall be granted you. What is it you request? Up to half the kingdom it shall be done." Then Esther answered and said, My petition and request is this. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said. So Haman went out that day, joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand or tremble before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. And he sent and called for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman told them of his great riches, the multitude of his children, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and servants of the king. Moreover, Haman said, besides Queen Esther, invited no one else but me to come in with the king to the banquet that she prepared. And tomorrow I am again invited by her, along with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, that a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and in the morning suggested to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it. Then go merrily with the king to the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made. Esther, chapter 6. That night the king could not sleep. So one was commanded to bring the book of the records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, the doorkeepers who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. Then the king said, "What honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this?" And the king's servant who attended him said, "Nothing has been done for him." So the king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace suggest that the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. The king's servant said to him, Haman is there, standing in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king asked him, What shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, Whom would the king delight and honor more than me? And Haman answered the king, For the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought which the king is worn, and a horse on which the king is ridden, which has a royal crest placed on its head. And let this robe and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that he might array the man whom the king delights to honor. Then parade him on horseback throughout the city square, and proclaim before him, Thus it shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, Hurry, take the robe and the horse, as you have suggested to do so for Mordecai the Jew, who sits within the king's gate. Leave nothing undone of all that you have spoken. So Haman took the robe and the horse arrayed Mordecai, and led him on horseback through the city square, and proclaimed before him, Thus it shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Afterward Mordecai went back to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning, and with his head covered. When Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him, his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fail, is of Jewish descent, you will surely not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs came hastened to bring Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. Esther, chapter 7. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther, and on the second day, at the banquet of wine, the king again said to Esther, What is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Up to half the kingdom. It shall be done. And Queen Esther answered and said, If I have found favor in your sight, O my king, O king, if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. We have been sold as male and female slaves. I would have held my tongue, although the enemy could never compensate for the king's loss. So King Ahasuerus answered it and said to Queen Esther, Who is he, and where is he, who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. So Haman was terrified before the king and queen. And Esther said, Then the king arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stood before Queen Esther, pleading for his life, for he saw that evil was determined against him by the king. When the king returned from the palace garden to the place of the banquet of wine, Haman had fallen across the couch where Esther was. And the king said, Will he also assault the queen while I am in the house? As the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Now Harbona of the eunuchs said to the king, Look, the gallows, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf, is standing at the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him on it. Then they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath subsided. Esther, chapter 8. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. So the king took off a signet ring which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. Now Esther spoke again to the king, fell down at his feet, and implored him with tears to counteract the evil Haman, the Agagite, the scheme which he had devised against the Jews. And the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, if it pleases the king, and if I found favor in his sight, and the thing seemed right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to annihilate the Jews who were in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that will come to my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen? Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, indeed, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he tried to lay his hand on the Jews. You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews as you please, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's signet ring, for whatever is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet ring, no one can revoke. So the king's scribe were called at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day, and it is written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, the satraps, the governors, and the princes of the provinces from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces in all, to every province in its own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. And they wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by couriers on horseback, riding on royal horses bred from swift steeds. By these letters the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province who would assault them, both little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. On one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, a copy of the document was to be issued as a decree for every province. And published for all people, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers who rode in royal horses went out, hastened, and pressed by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Shunan, the citadel. So Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, with a great crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad, and the Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor. And every province and city, wherever the king's command and decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, and a feast and a holiday. Then many of the people of the land became Jews because of fear of Jews fell upon them. Esther, chapter 9. Now in the 12th month, that is, the month of Adar, on the 13th day, the time came for the king's command and his decree to be executed. On the day that the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, the opposite occurred, in that the Jews themselves overpowered those who hated them. The Jews gathered together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm. And no one could withstand them, because fear of them fell upon all people. And all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and all those doing the king's work helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai became increasingly prominent. Thus the Jews defeated all their enemies with a stroke of the sword, with slaughter and destruction, and did what they pleased with those who hated them. In Shushan, the citadel, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. Also, Parshadatha, Dalphon, Asaphtha, Poratha, Adelia, Aridatha, Parmeshata, Arishai, Aridai, and Vajizatha. The 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, they killed, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. On that day, a number of those who were killed in Shushan, the citadel, was brought to the king. And the king said to the queen, Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men in Shushan, the citadel, the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition? It shall be granted you. Or what is your further request? It shall be done. That's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you for watching. Glory be to God. My gosh, this was awesome. In fact, this was incredibly awesome. It is truly an honor that I get to do this. Thank you for watching. I'm incredibly hyped. A little too hyped, but hyped. This is awesome. Thank you for watching. Seriously. Thank you for keeping up. And this is a Silver Watchman. Signing out.